Hi there, this is Shauna from the Foil Fox, and I am so glad to be with you today. I am sharing a new card design called Hello Lovely, and that comes from this sentiment from the Happy Hellos. This is a Just Sentiments Happy Hellos with lots of hellos in there. And then I'm using Feathered Friends 8 mini. This is a mini with just the branch, so I'm using the branch from the stamp and a branch from the die. This came out a few months ago, but I am using a brand new bird, and this is Feather Friends 13, and he is such a cutie, so we'll be making him in this project. And then I'm using one other new item, which is on the border leaves, and it makes this wonderful cutout leaves frame. It's fabulous, and you'll see that later. Now I'm going to go on to the papers we're going to be using. I'm using watercolor paper. I'm using hot press here. I'm using a piece of Bristol paper for the bird for ink blending, 2 A2 panels of white cardstock, and a white cardstock A2 card base. And then I'm going to take my watercolor paper. Now I'm using hot press, but you can use cold press if you'd like, and I'm going to use a bunch of distress inks. Here I've got Mowed Lawn, Rustic Wilderness, Salvage Patina, Peacock Feathers, and I'm just smushing these each on here. Ripe, this is honey, wild honey, excuse me, Ripe Persimmon, and then Chipped Sapphire. And I've got these all on here, and I'm going to use all of these colors, and you'll see we'll do them in a certain sequence. I do have a brush and my spritzer. I am spritzing this all till it gets quite wet. I started out with a pretty big brush with it quite wet and loosening up these colors. And I liked how it was coming on, but I wanted some broader pieces of color on there. And after I splattered these on, I decided that I would go to an acetate sheet where I could put bigger pieces of color down quicker using that acetate. I am going to blot the extra if it's really wet, and then dry it. I'm going to dry in between each of these these main colors, so the blues and then the greens and the yellows. The yellow and orange can go together though. And I'm going to wipe off my acetate each time. I spritzed all these colors so they're a little bit loose. So let's do the greens. Here's the Mowed Lawn, and the little edge got caught into the Rustic Wilderness, but that's okay. As long as I have little bits of the lighter green from the Mowed Lawn and then the darker from the Rustic Wilderness, then I am good to go. And then I'm going to blot up any extra and dry it. Now you see I dry it on the back and the front, and I don't dry it with the paper down flat onto my surface. It will warp more that way, so I do pick it up. Now I'm using wild honey and a little bit of the ripe persimmon. I'm going to use the ripe persimmon rather judiciously. I don't want to really flood it with a lot of that color, but I do like it, and that's why I'm switching to the brush here. Now I'm really paying attention to the outside perimeters, because I want to make sure that I get those borders with some color. And I'm just adding some more blue, and I'm going to add some more green where I think that I need it in splatters. And then I'm using the Chipped Sapphire, that darker blue. The darker blue really does help some of those areas pop, but you don't want to put a ton on there either, unless you want a real darker, more evening or midnight type look. But I'm making sure that I have it around the borders, and then it's really great to start out with bigger pieces of the ink on there, and then going to the splatters, and you'll see what I mean. It really comes out, it really shows through, and it's a nice combination. Now it looks like a hot mess right now, I understand, but bear with me, because it'll really turn out nicely. So it's all completely dry. Make sure it's very dry before you die cut it. I'm going to die cut it with this on the border leaves. I've left the hello, the sentiment in there because I don't like to take them apart if I can avoid it. Plus, maybe I'll use that hello for something else. I'm going to cut out the center anyway. I might as well cut those so that I could use it, save it for something else. Now I'm just going to poke out all of these little areas that need to be poked out. Comes out very cleanly. And I'm going to do the same with this one that is the one that we inked all up. I did, as you note, I did cut that other white one with one of those panels that I had earlier because I want to stack these on top of one another to add a little bit of height, a little bit of dimension to the card. You can see how that fits. You know, it just goes together so nicely. There's a couple of areas I forgot to poke out, so I have to do that. But I am going to use some liquid glue here. The reason why I'm using liquid glue is a couple of reasons. One, I want it to be able to slip it around to be sure I get it perfectly stacked on top of the white one underneath. But also, these have a lot of open areas, and you can't get double stick tape in there that would show through, and it wouldn't be very pleasing at all. So now I'm just going to lay that right on top of one another, and it just goes together so nicely. So now I have two thicknesses, and it's going to just give a great dimension to my card. Now I have that already, and you can see how it's going to fit perfectly on the top of my card. I have my white card base. I also have another one of those panels. If you remember, I had two. Used the one for to cut out the leaves, and then now I have one that I am going to blend bright buttercup around the edges, making kind of a halo for it to peek through all those little openings of these leaves. I want the center to stay white, so it is kind of more halo, and I want the edges to even get a little bit darker, so I'm going to use honey nut for that. But mostly I'm using the bright buttercup because I really like that color, but we will deepen it with some honey nut. And I keep trying it back and forth because I want to make sure that I'm getting enough on there so you can see it, but I'm not crowding the center. I'm still keeping it quite white. So you can see how it gets darker with that honey nut just on the edges, just adding a little bit of drama. Now I smushed down some honey nut onto my work surface and loosened it up with some water, and I'm just adding really fine splatters with a very small brush here. And I don't want the whole thing to be splattered. I'm really concentrating more towards the bottom of it. Now I would let that dry really well, and once it's dry, then I could add the double stick tape and apply it to the front of my card base. Now I got a little overzealous there, so now I have to peel it back a little bit and straighten it out. But there we are. It's all on there, and now I'm going to put these leaves on there, and I'm going to just dot the glue around just like I did before, especially on the all the way around the perimeter. On the very edges, I want to make sure that I get glue, and then I just knead it randomly on some of these leaves. If I miss some of the leaves, you'll see that I'll actually take out a toothpick and I can squeeze on some glue onto my work surface, and I can go underneath any of these leaves that I think need to be stuck down. But don't worry, you don't have to do every one of them, just the main ones. So there it is, and so we've got the real beginnings of our card, but we're going to set that aside and we're going to work on the bird because the bird is the main focal point. I'm using Bristol paper here because I want the inks to blend very nicely, and I'm just going to cut out this bird. This is just a bird that just is a die, does not have a stamp to it, and it has all these little pieces, and you want to be really careful when you take this apart so you preserve all those little pieces. And the main colors I'm going to be using are blues and yellows. So I'm going to start out with some blues. I'm starting out with Blueberry Sky and Enchanted Evening. I'm just going on the head, and I'm going to go down the sides on each side of the bird because that's where his wings are going to be, and I want his wings to be a dark blue. So I'm kind of going around the perimeter. Now there's pieces that go on top of this for his body, so I'm not too worried about that. The tail feathers and his head are going to be showing, but not these other pieces, not the center. There's other pieces that cover that up. You see, I really colored dark the blue with dark blue, the tail feathers, and that little crescent shape, because that's just a little bit of his wing on the right that will peek through. But you'll see it'll all become more clear to you when it starts to come together. Now this is, I'm adding some yellow. I'm also going to add a little bit of the orange, but first I'm going to work on the breast. Here I'm adding yellow. I'm going to add the orange to it as well. It needs to get a little bit darker, so if you add the orange to it, it really starts to make that breast area pop. And you'll see again what I mean when we start gluing it together. I'm adding a little blue down at the very, very bottom because that's going to be down where his tail feather is. And a little blue right on each edge because that's where those wings are as well. Now this is the wing, his other wing, and that's going to be mostly blue. And I'm going to go darker towards the bottom of the wing. I will add a little bit of the yellow here and there as well, just to add a little bit more interest. Now there's little pieces, his beak, I'm going to use the Summer Sunrise, so kind of a more orangey color. And then there's a little triangle. It's going to go up on his neck. I want that to be quite bright yellow. So I'm making that quite bright yellow, and then adding a little bit of color more to his head and to his breast, even though most of it's going to be covered over with the other pieces. And now for his feet, I'm just going to be using smoky shadow. I wanted them to be dark. I could have made them yellow, and that maybe would have been really nice. But I ended up making them darker with the smoky shadow ink. And of course, all of these inks are Papertrey inks. And I do have a complete supply list. You can always catch that on foilfox.com. Not to mention that all the supplies are available there. And you can take a look at it on papertreyink.com or Ink to Paper. Now I'm adding a little bit of glue and assembling this wonderful bird. So his wing goes on, now his kind of breastplate and his other little sliver of a wing. See, that's just a little tiny sliver. And then we're going to put that little triangle in there. Just a little piece in there. Just adds a little oomph to him. He's so cute. And then we're going to add his beak. We're just putting this poor little guy together. And now we'll, he has his little eye there. And his eye is in two parts. There's the center, which I left white because it's kind of the pupil of his eye. And then I colored the other one with a black Sharpie, the outside ring. I could have cut it with black and then cut it with white, but I found that to be much easier if I just took out my Sharpie and cut the outside and then left the other white. So my bird is done, you know, it's got his legs and everything, he's all done. Now I'm working on this twig, which I cut out using the matching die set. This is in the Feathered Friends 8 Mini, and I stamped it with cocoa bean. I've put some foam tape on the back of the twig and of the bird, and I haven't pushed them down yet. I was going to stamp the sentiment. I thought I was going to do it with an acrylic block, kind of chickened out, but I wanted to make sure it was really, straight. So I'm putting it in a stamp position and stamping it with the dark indigo, and I stamped that wonderful sentiment, "Hello, lovely." And now I'm taking the foam tape off of the bird and the twig. The twig's going to be tucked in a little bit on the right side and then showing on the left side, peeling off the tape. And that is all there is. And I think he's just charming. I just love birds anyway. I have them all over my garden and feeders everywhere. So I'm in love with birds, so I have to always do birds whenever they're available. But he's just adorable, and I love that wonderful colorful background, because that's kind of how leaves are, all sorts of different colors. So it couldn't be lovelier as far as I'm concerned. I do hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. And here's a few items that I used: the On the Border leaves, the Feather Friends 13, that's the die set, Feather Friends 8 Mini 8 Stamp and Die, the Just Sentiments Happy Hello. Pop over to blog.inktopaper.com for more inspiration, or inktopaper.com, or please come see us at Foiled Fox. We have everything there, loads of inspiration, and all the supplies. Thanks so much, and we will see you next time. Bye.